pitcher, especially left-handed pitcher, especially if you're Framber Valdez, your dream is to be able to throw a complete game shutout as a major league pitcher. And this is something as good as he's been. This is the first time he's been able to do it in his career. And what is up with all this talk about the Astros searching for a GM this offseason? Are those rumors true? So we're going to talk about this and more on this edition of the Locked On Astros podcast.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Astros, your daily Astros podcast. Here are your hosts, Eric the Man Huysman and Brett H-Town Wheelhouse Chancey.
We are Locked On Houston Astros, and we hope that you join us for a daily Locked On Astros podcast. My name is Eric Huysman. Find me on Twitter at Eric Talk Astros. Find the show at Locked On Astros, your team every day. And Brett's not in tonight, so I have special guest Robert Land. Where can they find you on Twitter?
I'm at HST Podcast. It's Houston Sports Talk. I have been doing my podcast for 9 years. You can also find me on YouTube as well. Go there, subscribe to us, and would love to hear what you guys think about what we're doing. I'm doing a Texans post-game show as well every single week with Sean Bajani with Sports Radio 610. So it's some great content, and I hope everybody comes and checks it out.
All righty, guys. So while he brings up YouTube, don't forget to make the Locked On Astros podcast your first listen every day. Where it's on YouTube, go subscribe to us. Go subscribe to Robert's podcast, and just make us your first listen on Apple, Odyssey, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcasts. Check us out. And so definitely this was one of those games, Robert, I was talking to, I think myself or Brandon yesterday. I think Brandon was on for a few minutes, but I think I said that this is one of those games where the Astros were going to score 12 runs and then come back and get shut out or something like that. But then I read all the stats about the Tigers. They ain't very good this year. They're probably not going to be very good for a few years. But it just looked like Framber Valdez was in total control. Yes, he did give up 6 hits, but he spread out those hits. And when there were runners on base or something like that, the Astros made some great defensive plays behind them. You had Alvarez throwing out the runner at home plate, and I know that they had to overrule the initial safe call. But then you had Bregman make some great plays. Yuli made some great plays. He had some great catches out there by Chaz and Kyle Tucker. So opposite of the last game, the Astros played some great defense behind Framber.
Well, I want to just give a moment for Framber, because what we forget is when he came up, there was no fanfare. This wasn't like, oh, we're waiting to see the next phenom. Like this wasn't the Hunter Brown thing. Framber just kind of came up, no big deal. And I just kind of feel like his whole career to this point has just been, you watch him out there, it's no big deal. And the turnaround from the guy that we saw when he first came up, and his ability to sometimes not be able to get out of jams, get stressed out, not be able to throw strikes. All of that stuff has just gone away, and it's miraculous. He's gone from the most inconsistent guy coming up when we first saw him to just like you can count on it. You book it. You're like, Framber's on the mound. We're getting 6, 7, 8 innings, and we finally got a 9-inning game from Framber, and it was just a matter of time, wasn't it, Eric? I mean, this is a matter of time.
Yes, and definitely, especially with, I think he had 80-something pitches through 8 innings, through 7 innings, and then they brought him out for the 8th, and he was very economical with his pitch count today. And Dusty Baker, the old school manager, Dusty Baker, was like, you know what, I'm going to leave the ball in the hands of my ace, my current ace, because Justin Verlander's on the IL, but I'm going to leave it in his hands, and he went out there and did the job. So right now, Valdez is tied for 7th with the best ERA in baseball with a 2.50 ERA, and that is he trails 4 players in terms of ERA: Justin Verlander, Dylan Cease, Shane McClanahan, and Alex Manoah. So those are some guys that he trails in the American League, and then right behind him is Shohei Ohtani at 2.55. So, yes, I think that he has put his name in there for Cy Young talk. He now has 15 wins, and he's just doing it in dominant fashion. I mean, all he needed to do was to tie Jacob deGrom's record, was throw 6 innings and allow fewer than 3 runs. He did better. He did a complete game shutout, and it's just amazing what he can do, and it shows how dominant he can be. And we saw how good he can be in the playoffs, but we also saw that he can unravel just as quickly. But this guy with Verlander, Lance McCullers in a playoff rotation, is that pretty scary, Robert?
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't unraveled that I can remember in a long, long time. I mean, right. Framber has just been gold basically since 2020 and that pandemic season, and then what he did in the playoffs, and then pretty much it's like he's been in cruise control. Yeah, there's always going to be a little bumps in the road here and there, but this year, I mean, there's not even that. There's not even the bump in the road. It's just the smooth sailing and all that. And you're talking about his defense and Alex Bregman. Let's just take a second for Alex Bregman, Eric, because Alex Bregman is now MVP level Alex Bregman. The Alex Bregman we saw 3 years ago. And the confidence that he has at the plate right now is now translating to the field. He's making the barehanded plays. He's in the hole. He's getting double plays second to first base. Somehow he's at second base making a double play the other day. I mean, Bregman it's unreal, and it changes the entire what's happened to Alex Bregman in the last month, and now you're seeing Jordan come back, which that's another big storyline we're seeing in the last couple of days. I'm sure you guys talked about it yesterday, but the fact that you got these two guys together with Altuve and what Kyle Tucker, and you know what those guys are going to bring, if you can actually see them for the first time this year playing well together, 2 MVP level candidates when they're on their game. I mean, what a massive difference that's going to make going into the playoffs to see that. And Bregman, not just what he's doing offensively, but like I said, defensively. He was not good defensively last year in the playoffs. The injury was hurting him there too. So that makes a huge difference. And Jeremy Pena, you talk about defense. He's starting to get a little bit in his zone. I feel like Jeremy Pena is getting his second win. He hit the rookie wall. We saw the hitting drop off. The defense all year, I get scared more at the routine plays than when he's got to make the great play. I feel like he's got a really good chance usually to make that great play, but when he's trying to make the routine plays, that's when the errors happen. But, you know, it's everything, Eric, that you're starting to see all of the pieces come into place, and Pena and Bregman and Jordan. And, you know, I mean, you guys, I'm sure, have talked ad nauseum about Kyle Tucker. He's the best defensive right fielder the Astros have ever had. Eric, I have been watching the Astros since I was a kid. I was born in 1971. I've covered the Astros for over 20 years. I've been covering sports for 30 years. Kyle Tucker in right field is about the best right fielder the Astros have ever had, one of the best right fielders I've ever seen. And this defense is starting to look really good along with the hitting. It just feels like things are coming together. I don't want to say it too loud, but, you know, something could happen here, Eric. We know that, but it's exciting. I mean, this is exciting to see they're coming together at the right time.
Yeah, and if you look at Jeremy Pena with the bat too, I know you mentioned his defense, but he just looked like he's in the zone hitting wise too. He had a home run, I believe, the other day. Then he also went 3 for 5 today, and he's stealing some bases too. So he's looking like he's kind of getting, like you said, his second win back, but not just at defensively, but offensively. And that's what the Astros need. If he's going to be batting second for this Astros team, you need him to be hitting. And no matter how good a defense you are, you need him hitting pretty good, because you already have Martin Maldonado, who did get a hit today, but overall he's been up and down. He's still batting 174 for the season. And then Chas McCormick has been heating up a little bit, but he's still batting 236, 732. And we'll talk a little bit about the center field battle in a second. But Alvarez is just looking good in left field. And somebody said I misspoke earlier. The initial call was ruled safe at the plate, and they called him out. And I did what the umpire did. Remember, the umpire actually said he was safe, and then the Astros bullpen dugout was about to explode, and he was like, sorry, he's out after a replay. So that's definitely something that teams need to start taking note of. Alvarez is not just a bat. He may not be the fastest guy out there, but he's got an arm out there. And so that's just awesome to watch. And speaking of awesome, have you bet on the Astros this year? Are you planning on bet on the Astros? Well, Bet Online is your number one source for all your pro and college football needs this season. Find all the latest football league developments, game matchups, news, and podcasts, including this year's opening week's games, which came past. And who would have thought the Texans would have tied in that game versus Colts? BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. And speaking of watching the Astros are playing great baseball. They're coming back in to play the A's this weekend. And if you don't have seats, I know it's just the A's, but still, the home games are running out. So go to Simple Seats. Simple Seats is great. It's a simple way to go to more games. They divide the venue into zones, so you have to waste time searching endlessly for seats. Don't want a seat over here, don't want a seat over here. And the zone seating gives you the best value for your money. You pick the zone, they pick the seats. You get the best possible price. No surprises at checkouts. You know how most places have the surprising fees at the end? Well, not at Simple Seats. And the ticket prices you see are the only ones you'll pay with our all-in-one prices. No added fees added. And if you go to Simple Seats and use the code Locked On 10, that is Locked On 10, you'll get $10 off your first order. So Simple Seats, you can go to more games, period, by getting cheaper seats. And so go check them out. And let's talk about Alvarez. I know we talked about his defense, but he's making some good strides at the plate. I know he didn't quite drive the ball out today, but he hit a deep ball to center field. That's a little bit promising. But overall, Alvarez looks like he's starting to hit the ball a little bit. He had 2 singles today. His batting average is back up to 293. I know he was stuck kind of in a rut for a little bit, but do you think that Alvarez is going to be locked in from this point on?
Yeah, it's looking like it. I sure hope so, because you can't go anywhere, I don't think, in the playoffs unless you get a Jordan that we're more familiar with. Not to say he's got to get the 1100 OPS that he had earlier in the year in the playoffs, but you want the Jordan that you're familiar with. And what I've seen is not just the long fly balls, like you said, but opposite field power. That's the Jordan. If he's doing opposite field power, the hand is not bothering. He hit a home run on Sunday that was at one of the bigger parts of the ballpark as an opposite field home run. And so that's a real promising part of what we're seeing from him. The crazy thing is, even when he's not hitting, he scares the other team half to death. He's still getting walks left and right. They still are pitching around him most of the time, it seems like. So that's good. But yeah, I love what I'm seeing from Jordan right now.
Yeah, and the Astros just overall, they seem to be coming out offensively, and maybe they just hit like, you got to struggle. You got to hit the wall at some point. You rather them hit the wall in September and August versus in October, because that's when the games matter. And I think hopefully that's what happened. So the offense did score 7 runs tonight on 13 hits with runners in scoring position. It's going to sound not as good as it was, but they were 6 for 15 with runners in scoring position. But they started off the game pretty hot. They had a whole bunch of singles. They weren't going for the home run ball tonight, but they had a lot of singles. And Eduardo Rodriguez just wasn't really he didn't really have his A game on. He allowed 10 hits, 5 earned runs, 1 walk, 2 strikeouts. Somehow he lasted 5 innings. But that's just the Rodriguez that we've seen in past with the Red Sox. He's either really good or really bad. But when Framber Valdez is doing what he's doing, just tying Jacob deGrom and just setting records left and right. I mean, should he get any type of talk for Cy Young this year, Robert?
I would think so. I mean, I would think so. And the one advantage, obviously, that he's going to have over Verlander is starts. Assuming he's fine the rest of the year, that's the only advantage that he's going to have. And I mean, of everything that's going on with the Astros, I mean, that's the one caveat actually is Verlander. Want to see him back out there. Want to see him doing well. He doesn't seem to be panicking. I don't know if you caught it, but he was on HBO the other night with Bob Costas, and he did not seem like there was a lot of panic in what was going on with his injuries. So that was a good thing. And I just think Framber, I mean, because he's with the Astros, he might get lost in the shuffle because of Verlander. I mean, Verlander played such a huge shadow over him. And so if they're going to vote for the Astro, they might vote for Verlander. But if the numbers continue to pile up and some guys start to fall off and Framber keeps doing what he's doing, I mean, he should be in the conversation. I don't think he's quite there yet, but we still got 3 weeks to go, so you never know.
I mean, this is his first complete game of his career. Sorry, first complete game shutout of his career, and he's now tied with Jacob deGrom with 24. If he sets 25 and takes over the major league record for a season, now deGrom has 26 straight, and that's over 2 seasons. But nobody's made 25 in 1 season. So if Framber Valdez does that, that would kind of give him a little extra edge, maybe a few more votes, because this doesn't happen in this time of the baseball when basically managers don't leave their guys in past seeing the hitters 3 times. This doesn't happen much. So Dusty Baker is going a little bit old school with his ace. The Astros are kind of catering to his will, so to speak, on the road. They're giving him the blue uniforms, the Sunday alternate uniforms, as we call it. But definitely he's just in total control right now. And I think that he's going to go 25 and maybe could keep it going because he just looks dominant. And even when he's not quite as good, he still somehow finds a way. That last game was kind of a little bit scary just because he gave up I believe it was like 4 runs or so, but only 2 of them were earned. So that's why it qualified as a quality start. So
yeah,
by the way,
one of the things you said, I want to just say one thing about, you said Dusty and what he's doing with Framber. I think this is huge. The fact that he's let these guys go deep, because you want your best arms out there in the playoffs. And you want them out there in big situations, and your starting pitchers typically are your best arms. They're the best arms on the entire ball club, and Framber's definitely one of your best arms. So if he can get you deep into games, do it. If he goes 7 or 8 innings, I love our bullpen, but Framber, if it's between Framber and those guys, I want Framber out there if at all possible. And that's the thing that's changed about baseball that I think is kind of stupid, because when you're in the playoffs, you want to win with your best guys out there, and Framber and starting pitchers that are dominant are those guys.
Yeah, and if you like to win and you like to eat good wings, why don't you go to Hooters of NASA? They have the world famous Hooters girls there, and every time the Astros are playing, they put it on all the TVs. They have the sound on, so you can hear it from any part of the restaurant, and they have great wings. I used to like the teriyaki, but then I tried the 3 Mile Island. Just really great. You got the curly fries. Brett likes the Chipotle buffalo and fries. What's your favorite? So come out to Hooters of NASA and see what all the hoots about. Anytime. So whether you're dining in, ordering out, or placing delivery order, the best food in Webster can be found here. And on October 2nd, they are organizing a big trip with some of the Hooters girls and some of the customers to go watch an Astros game. So go see if there's any spots available. And if you miss this time, they'll always do one in the future. And ask the GM, Rosie, why she hasn't worn black socks since October 26, 2005. I have a feeling I know why. So come enjoy happy hour, or should we say happy hour specials, Monday through Friday, 3 to 6 p.m. So many drink specials. Don't forget about Thursday with drink specials all day. Come hang out where the Locked On boys like to hang out and watch the game with Great Grub and Bruce. ask them what their featured beers are on tap, and tell them that the boys at Locked On Astros sent you by, and you'll get a free basket of fried pickles. And I know that's Brett's favorite. And so go check out the girls over at Hooters of NASA. So, so let's go ahead and kind of transition into Justin Verlander. A couple people were asking about Justin Verlander. We don't know exactly when he's going to come back, but he's leaning towards coming back. Maybe in a series, I would say probably Saturday if I had to guess right now. And Ledmus Diaz is back with the team. So that means he could be activated as soon as tomorrow. So I don't know if they've made any announcements after the game. Let me check real quick. But as far as I know, they haven't made any official announcements. But the Astros probably will have to send one player down. It's either going to be Yainer Diaz or JJ Matijevic. But if you need somebody to be that third catcher in the playoffs, you need to give Diaz some playing time. But if not, go ahead and send him back down and keep JJ up. So it's just who do you see as more valuable, Robert?
Oh, God. JJ Matijevic, and what was my other choice?
Diaz, Yainer Diaz, and then JJ Matijevic.
I don't know. I mean, I like let's put it this way. I like having the third catcher. I mean, it's hard to say because, Diaz didn't have any at bats. So I have nothing to go on with if he can hit or not. And Matijevic is hit in the minors, but hadn't shown yet he can hit the major leagues on a consistent basis.
Okay.
But I want to see him up because I would like to see more of what Diaz can do. I feel like I've seen some of Matijevic. And I also like having the idea of a third catcher hanging around. So you could pitch it Christian Vasquez if you are playing Martin Maldonado. It gives you that option. You're not going to pinch it Martin Maldonado, but I like having the option of having the third catcher available.
Yeah, and that's something that Brandon and I talked about on the Talking Stros podcast. We're on Gallery Sports Network as well, and also Hun asks about the four starting pitchers. This is something I talked about yesterday. We talked about it on Talking Stros as well, but I named the three of them. It's probably going to be Justin Verlander, Framber Valdez, then Lance McCullers. You got the lefty in the middle. And then the fourth guy is kind of a toss-up in the air. But I think that you're going to have to look at what Urquidy has done overall this season. He's been a little bit more consistent, and also he's kind of proven in the past that he can be that big game pitcher in the playoffs. So I think that they're probably going to have Urquidy in the rotation. And then I see Hunter Brown and Christian Javier in the bullpen, meaning I don't really see a place for Luis Garcia, at least in the ALDS. What do you think, Robert?
I disagree. Like I said, your best arms have got to be playing. And Luis Garcia, you can't tell me he's not one of the 12 best arms. They went with 12 last year in the ALDS. Luis Garcia is one of the 12 best arms. What you can do with Luis Garcia is he can come in and give you 2 or 3 innings. If something happens to one of your starters, I like having Luis Garcia around to give you like 2 or 3 innings to get you out of, having to use a ton of the bullpen. And Garcia, if you look at the numbers, the first 2 times through the order, he's really good. He slips the 3rd time through the order. So he's perfect for that situation. If there's an injury to one of your starters, if they get in trouble, if they're just having a terrible day, we're not expecting it. You hope not. But I love having Garcia around. Christian Javier, the theory is, Christian Javier, we've seen him come out of the pen in the playoffs and all that. I love his arm. I would prefer to see him start because I like seeing somebody that can shut down the good stuff. But here's what I will say about that. Christian Javier has never pitched this much in a season before. And I think what they're doing right now is trying to pull back on him, and they might just be using him in the bullpen because I think he's not ready to do a full season of starting and the playoffs starting. That's a big load. And Urquidy might be a little bit more prepared for that. He's not had a ton of this, experience in going this far in a season and pitching all the way through because he had some injuries last year. However, his arm might be just a hair more ready for it. So Christian Javier, because of the success out of the bullpen, I think he's going to be coming out. I agree with you. I agree with your 4 starters. No question about that.
Yeah. So let's go and transition into what happens if the Astros don't win it all this year. I know we're not talking about Mattress Mac here and his giveaway. We're talking about like what happens to Dusty Baker and James Click, because both of them are not. They're not. They don't have a contract for next year. And Jim Crane came out after the game, and apparently, with all the talk that's been going around today with Ken Rosenthal's article. Podcast. We'll talk about that in a second. But Jim Crane said that I'm aware that both contracts are up and we'll address it at the end of the season. We don't want any distractions right now. So basically, this is what Ken Rosenthal said on his podcast. In two complete, that's not it. But basically, he was talking about that there could be a chance. Oh, here it is. There could be some maneuvering if the Astros sputter in the playoffs, which frankly I don't expect. And talking about general manager, so James Click and Dusty Baker, I think we can all see the writing on the wall that they don't really see eye to eye. They don't have the same philosophies. James Click may be a little bit more analytical. He goes out and get players for this, and Dusty Baker, he does use the analytics, but I think he's a little bit more old school. But just remember that they did hire Dusty Baker, then they hired James Click. So according to Ken Rosenthal, that there's kind of feeling across baseball that the Astros would be searching for a GM next year. Is that fair after what James Click has done over the past 2 years? Basically kind of thrown into the situation after COVID and the whole Jeff Luhnow crisis, 2 or 3 years, whatever it was. But is it fair to just say, oh, well, just because you haven't gotten us to the World Series, you haven't won it, we're not going to give you a shot? Because he's done the best that he could with the limited payroll he has. They're actually, I believe, 10 million below where they were last year. So they're saving money this year. And Jim Crane likes that. But at the same time, they could have gone out and maybe added somebody more. So I'm not really, I don't want to focus too much on this, but if you're looking at all the rumors, does any of that matter at this point?
Well, I'm shocked that there would be that stuff coming out. I don't know where Ken Rosenthal is getting this to James Click, unless he's got to come out. Ken Rosenthal's got to come out and say there is a thing where that Click and Crane do not get along, because what Click has done since he's taken over, right. He's made so many great moves. I mean, he got Mancini for virtually nothing. He got Christian Vasquez for virtually nothing. He got Stanek for nothing. He got Montero for Abraham Toro. Not to mention Bregman was in that trade. Neris, he got him for nothing. It's the best bullpen that we've seen of these great Astro teams in the last 6 years from top to bottom. And 3 of those guys are James Click guys, the moves that he made. I mean, yeah, there's 1 or 2 moves that you could gripe about, Pedro Baez, but whatever. I mean, it was a free agent. It didn't cost you anything except a little money, and that was it. But, I mean, he's done a fantastic job. And I don't know if he doesn't get along with Dusty Baker. I don't know if there's a difference in how they think about things, but what I will say is, I mean, Dusty, you got to appreciate the other stuff that Dusty does beyond the analytics. And unless there's big disagreements about what Dusty is doing in the playoffs, because we know what they've done in the regular season the last 2 years, unless there's disagreement on what Dusty, the moves that he's making in the playoffs, if that comes to a head this year, yeah, maybe so. The other thing that is playing into this is Dusty's age, and Joe Espada is going to have other opportunities. And if they feel like we do not want to let him go for a couple more years of Dusty Baker, when we could have Joe Espada for a long time down the road, then that's the other factor in with the Dusty Baker's decision. But I would much more think that it's Dusty Baker who's a little bit more job on the line here than it would be James Click. I mean, like, what's the argument against James Click at this point? Yeah, and they haven't had much to draft. So what are we judging on the draft? He had 1 draft, and it's been this year. I mean, you lost all the, so many guys in the other drafts, and then they cut the rounds down. So that's been very difficult. And they're still bringing up guys that are contributing. And then he made the trade for Yainer Diaz, and he might have got you a really good catcher for the future. And we're starting to see what he can do in AA and AAA the last couple of years. So, I mean, yeah, it would be ridiculous. And unless they just hate each other, Click and Crane hate each other. No, he can't go anywhere. What's the point of that? And even if they fail in the playoffs, teams fail in the playoffs. Luck has a lot to do with it. I mean, the Astros won 100 games, and Kevin Brown beat them 2 out of 3 times in 1998. And I mean, we know weird things can happen.
Right.
And that was a great team with Randy Johnson and all the talent those guys had. And you just, it's such a weird thing. And we've had the injuries the last few years too. I mean, people forget Lance McCullers was out last year. Justin Verlander was out last year. I mean, they made it to the World Series without their 2 best pitchers. I mean, it's unbelievable. And not to mention your MVP top 5 guy was hurt all of last year, and he was hurt in the playoffs. And he was, playing with one arm and one leg. I don't know what he was, but obviously he was terrible, and he wasn't right. So to get there to the World Series with those 3 guys hurt, it's unbelievable what Dusty has done with this team. And I have my issues with Dusty and his lineups and all that kind of weird crap, but you can't argue with what's going on in the field at the end of the day, wins and losses, and what he's done in the playoffs.
I see a lot of people in the chat saying, well, Dusty retires if he wins World Series. And some people say Dusty retires either way. But this is what he said today. Yeah, I like to come back. I like to win the World Series this year and next year too. I've always said if I win 1, I win 2. So you have to win 1 first in order to win 2.
Yeah, he said that over and over again, Eric. He's talked about that before. He like, everybody's like, as soon as you get a World Series, and Dusty's like, nope. Dusty loves this. This is his life. He's a 50-year lifer. I think, he's afraid if he leaves baseball, he dies maybe next. And Dusty loves life. He's got his vineyard and all that, and he's got, this other stuff that he does. But, Dusty loves being out there. You can tell he loves being out there. He doesn't like us, doesn't like the media, but he loves being out there, being a manager.
Right. I would actually agree with you on Dusty Baker. I know there's a lot of people out there that don't really like Dusty Baker, but I think that he's exactly what the Astros need for right now. But the only problem is Joe Espada. You can't hold on to him for too long. He may find another team next year if he's not made the Astros. But speaking of Kevin Brown, Hunter Brown is making his first start on the road, and he's be starting in his home town. And so I think his college, which is the what college was it? It was WSU. His college is basically, a lot of them are coming out to support him, and apparently the Tigers are offering a discount for, it's Wayne State University, it's right there, duh. The Tigers are offering a discount for every game of the series to the entire Wayne State University community. This guy is a big deal for this community. I mean, apparently that they're talking about him. Hey, what about Hunter Brown? So Julia Morales was saying that there's always a lot of media when Astros come town because Justin Verlander's here. But this time it was a little bit of Justin Verlander, but a lot of Hunter Brown. Like, what's Hunter Brown going to do? And so it's good to see a hometown boy come back. And the Astros got him in the steal because he didn't really start pitching until he really got to the college area. And the Astros scout that saw him, I'm like, sheesh, that's a little bit different. This is my first year, but this guy has something. I don't know how he'd line up wise, but I remember leaving thinking there's a guy from a D2 school up in Detroit throwing like 94 to 96 miles per hour with a power slider. I feel like that doesn't happen often. So if he was in a D1 school, other teams might have seen him a little bit more. He may not have lasted as long as he did, but because he played at a D2 school, the Astros were able to pick him up later in the draft. So Hunter Brown, what are you expecting from him?
Let me ask you this before I say that. What was the Astro that you grew up rooting for? Who was your favorite Astro?
I would say Jeff Bagwell.
Okay, so basically this is what's happening with this game and Hunter Brown. Hunter Brown is basically, if Eric Huysman grew up and he gets drafted by the Astros as a big Astro fan, and then Eric is playing with Jeff Bagwell, and now he goes out and he plays first base, and he runs back into the dugout, and he gets to hang out with Jeff Bagwell. at Minute Maid Park. I mean, that's what Hunter Brown is living. This is an incredible, like, it's such a fantastic story because, I mean, this is every kid's dream. It's amazing that he gets to play with his hero. I mean, so many guys, you get to the major, your hero's gone, or you get to the NFL and they're long gone. And this is a guy that he grew up with that's still around. And, wouldn't have happened if Justin Verlander was like, yeah, I'm going to come back from the Tommy John surgery. I mean, what are the odds? He's gone for 2 years. Remember, it was this, like, we were surprised when the Astros re-signed him. And then, and so, like, the odds of that happening, and then Hunter Brown just happens to walk into the Astros the year that Verlander is having. And, and the fact Justin Verlander is not even on the field, so he can just, he's not worried about anything right now because he can't play. So he can just, there's not, I've got to think about what I'm going to do with this hitter and that hitter. So Hunter Brown can go back to him and, they can talk about game planning and stuff like that with the pitchers and stuff like, and then, Justin Verlander is going to get all this attention when he comes to Detroit, but here's now Hunter Brown. So, I mean, the crowd out there should be, it should be a fantastic crowd for this game. That's the thing I think about, Eric, is, it's such a great human story. Like, what to expect from Hunter Brown? He's not going to throw it. There's not going to be a shutout. Eventually, the guy's got to give up a run. But I love his stuff. And, he's still got some things that he needs to develop. But, I mean, the thing that surprised me the most, Eric, and I don't know about you, was his control. To go 6 innings, okay. Shutout, okay. But one walk in his first start in 6 innings. That was impressive.
Yeah, and just his overall control. And he was not stressed. He was not worried. He probably was inside, but he just looked like he was in total control. So the Astros have a magic number of 15 for the best record in American League. They currently they're ahead of the Yankees by 6 games, the Mariners by 11.5 games, the Blue Jays 11.5 games, and the Rays 12 games. So I know that they're probably going to get that in the next maybe week or maybe 2 weeks or so. But how about the Dodgers accidentally popping the corks last night for clinching the playoffs, and then they still have 2 more games they had to win in order to get it. So the MLB messed up or something, and so Dave Roberts was like, "Oh, I'm not worried about it. It's not like we're going to go 0-23 the rest of the way. I'm sure we're still going to make the playoffs." So, but that's why you never count your Yoshis before they hatch. That's my saying. But any closing thoughts from today's game?
Nothing. I mean, like I said, it's just there's real excitement over the last couple of days that the guys that were struggling, we're starting to see come out of it, and things are starting to come together. I mean, going back to our last conversation, they're starting to click. They're starting to click. That's the key word for the show. And so, I'm excited to see Aledmys Diaz come back, and hopefully we're going to see Justin Verlander soon, and he's going to be okay. But I mean, that's the big thing. You want Justin Verlander okay for the playoffs. You want Jordan okay for the playoffs and hitting well. You love what you're seeing from Alex Bregman. If all those things sort of come together in this force, you're like, well, I don't want to say this too loud, but that's a really good sign. It's a really good sign. And this pitching staff, man, it's best pitching staff from 1 to 12 that I've seen in Astros history. From 1 to 12, I've seen better from 1 to 5, 1 to 8. Not 1 to 12. This pitching staff is unreal this year.
Yeah, I remember we're playing the Twins, and when they switched booth, I think one of the Twins guy came in and said, "Brian Abreu is your mop-up guy," with as good as he is. And so, yeah, the Astros are in pretty good hands. So go ahead and tell us once again where they can find you at, and a little bit about your podcast.
Yeah, I've been doing this podcast, like I said, for 9 years. This will be 9 years this month. I think actually in 6 days is my 9-year anniversary. Been doing it weekly, over 1,200 episodes. I mean, have had tons of ex-Rockets, ex-Astros. If you go to the YouTube site, there's a playlist for as Astros fans out there. You will love this because there are playlists where it's Astros history and memories, and where I interviewed Jimmy Wynn and J.R. Richard before they passed away, and Bob Aspromani and Tal Smith. I've talked to Kevin Bass. All those interviews are in the Astros history part of the playlist on YouTube. We're also on Spotify and Apple and everywhere you're going to find your podcast. But the YouTube stuff, you're going to want to look for the playlist and have fun with that, and check it out. I'm doing things right now at least 3 or 4 times a week, and it's growing fast. And just want to hear from everybody and see what they think about what I'm doing. For me, it's Astros, but it's also Texans and Rockets and Houston Cougars. I just had Houston Cougars guys on talking about what's going on with the football team. So it's a little bit of everything. It's Houston Sports Talk, meaning all of Houston sports. And I just thanks so much for letting me come on, Eric, and talk with you and you guys. I love what you and Brett do, and it's just the Locked On Network. I was with Locked On Texas for a couple of years, so I have some heart in the Locked On Network, and it's a really cool thing what the network is doing.
All righty. Well, thank you, Robert, once again for joining, and hopefully Hunter Brown. He may not pitch a shutout, but all we need this kid to do is go out there and pitch 5 to 6 innings, keep the Astros in a game, and if the offense keeps on rolling like this, that's all you need, because this can be a very potent lineup if it just clicks. And so that's all the clickbait we have for today. And so make sure you tune in to us every day. We are the Locked On Astros podcast, and make us your first listen. Go and subscribe to us on YouTube and listen to us on your way to work on Apple, Odyssey, Spotify, wherever you're checking out your podcast. Go ahead and listen to Locked On Astros. Go Stros.